In the days of oppression, when the Philistines ruled over Israel, the people groaned under their yoke, praying for deliverance. The land lay barren under the weight of foreign rule, and the cries of the oppressed rose to the heavens. Each passing year deepened their despair, and hope became a distant memory for many. The elders gathered to recount the old stories of God's faithfulness, whispering among themselves about the days when the Lord raised mighty judges to deliver them. But years had passed, and it seemed as if their pleas went unanswered. One such cry came from a woman of Zorah, the wife of Manoah. She was barren, and the sorrow of childlessness burdened her heart. In a society where lineage and posterity were regarded as blessings from the Lord, her barrenness made her feel forsaken. The weight of her unfulfilled dreams pressed upon her like a heavy stone. Yet she remained faithful, lifting her silent prayers to God, hoping that one day her shame would be turned to joy. One day, as she toiled in the fields under the scorching sun, the air around her shimmered, and a radiant figure appeared before her. Clothed in celestial light, his presence was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. She shielded her eyes, trembling at the vision before her. The messenger of the Lord spoke in a voice both gentle and powerful. "You shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall touch his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite, set apart to God from the womb. He will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines." Her heart leaped with joy and fear. How could this be? She had accepted her barrenness as final, yet now she was chosen for something greater than she could ever have imagined. The words of the angel echoed in her mind as she hastily made her way back home, her feet barely touching the ground. She found her husband, Manoah, and breathlessly recounted the divine encounter. Manoah listened with furrowed brows, his heart stirring with both excitement and uncertainty. He was a man of faith, but this news was unlike anything he had ever received. He fell to his knees, lifting his voice to the heavens. "Lord, let the man of God return to us, that we may learn how to raise the child who will be born." The Lord heard Manoah's prayer, and once more the angel appeared to his wife as she sat in quiet contemplation. She hurried to fetch her husband, and together they beheld the divine messenger. Manoah, with reverence, asked, "What is to be the rule for the boy's life and his work?" The angel responded, "Your wife must observe all I have commanded. She must not eat anything unclean, nor drink wine or strong drink. The boy shall be dedicated to God from the womb." Humbled and overwhelmed, Manoah wished to honor the divine visitor. "Please, let us prepare a young goat for you." But the angel refused, saying, "Offer it instead to the Lord." As Manoah made the offering upon the rock, a wondrous sight unfolded before them. Flames leaped upward from the altar, and as they watched, the angel ascended in the fire, disappearing into the heavens. Seeing this, Manoah fell to the ground, trembling. "We will surely die," he said, "for we have seen God." But his wife, filled with newfound strength, reassured him, "If the Lord had intended to kill us, he would not have accepted our offering or shown us these wonders." In due time the prophecy was fulfilled. She bore a son, and as they cradled the infant in their arms, they named him Samson, meaning, like the sun, a beacon of hope in the dark days of Israel. As he grew, it became evident that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. Even as a child, there was a presence about him, a divine energy that hinted at the greatness to come. The boy grew strong, his limbs thick with muscle, his eyes bright with a fire that none could quench. The people of Zorah watched in awe as Samson demonstrated feats of strength beyond that of ordinary men. It was said that even as a youth he could lift boulders that took many men to move. He would run through the fields faster than the swiftest gazelle, and no beast of the land could best him. Many whispered that he was indeed chosen by God, but few understood the full measure of the destiny that awaited him. As the years passed, Samson's strength only grew, and with it, the awareness of his divine calling. But destiny is never without its trials, and his journey to deliverance would be one fraught with struggle, passion, and sacrifice. Samson was unlike any man of his time. His strength was not merely physical, it was divine, a manifestation of the Spirit of the Lord within him. From a young age, he displayed abilities that defied explanation, and his people watched in awe as he performed feats of might that none could replicate. He could lift the heaviest of stones as if they were pebbles and bend iron with his bare hands. His speed was unmatched, his endurance legendary, and his courage unwavering. As he came of age, Samson became increasingly aware of his own power and the purpose for which he was born. Yet, with great strength came great challenges. He was often torn between the expectations of his people and the passions of his own heart. It was during this time that he first laid eyes on a woman from the Philistine city of Timnah. She was beautiful, and his heart desired her. Despite his parents' protests, he insisted on marrying her, believing that his fate was somehow intertwined with the Philistines. His journey to Timnah would prove to be a test of his strength and destiny. Along the way, a lion emerged from the thickets, roaring in challenge. The beast lunged at him, but before it could strike, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. With nothing but his bare hands, Samson tore the lion apart as though it were no more than a young goat. He left its carcass behind, unaware that this battle was a foreshadowing of greater struggles yet to come. Days later, when he passed by the same place, he found bees had built a hive within the lion's remains. Curious, he reached in and took honey, eating of its sweetness. It was an omen, a lesson that would shape his life. Out of great struggle there could come sweetness, but it would not come without cost. At his wedding feast he posed a riddle to the Philistines. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. The Philistines, unable to solve the riddle, turned to Samson's new wife, coercing her to betray his secret. In tears, she begged him for the answer, and at last he relented. When the Philistines answered correctly, Samson knew he had been betrayed. In fury, he traveled to Ashkelon, where he slew 30 men to settle the debt of the wager. Anger burned within him, and in his wrath he abandoned his wife, returning home in bitter disappointment. But his vengeance was not yet complete. When he learned that his wife had been given to another, his fury knew no bounds. He caught 300 foxes, tied their tails together in pairs with torches, and set them loose upon the Philistine fields. The fire spread, consuming their crops, their vineyards, and their livelihood. This act of destruction marked the beginning of a great conflict between Samson and the Philistines, a war that would span years and leave devastation in its wake. His path was set, his fate sealed. Samson was not just a man of strength. He was a weapon of divine judgment, a storm that would shake the very foundations of Philistine rule. Samson's actions against the Philistines did not go unnoticed. His exploits struck fear into the hearts of his enemies, yet his weaknesses also became apparent. He was mighty in battle, but his heart was often swayed by the desires of the flesh. His love for Philistine women would ultimately lead to his greatest downfall. After his victory against the Philistines, Samson continued to act as a judge over Israel for 20 years. Though he fought against the oppressors of his people, he often walked a path of solitude, burdened by his role as both warrior and deliverer. However, despite his victories, his heart led him to Gaza, where he found solace in the arms of a harlot. The Philistines, upon learning of his presence, plotted to capture him. They waited at the city gates, believing he would be trapped by dawn. Yet Samson was no ordinary man. At midnight he rose, walked to the gates of the city, and with his supernatural strength tore them from their foundations. He carried them upon his shoulders to the top of a hill, demonstrating once again that no trap could hold him. But though he was invincible in strength, he was vulnerable in spirit. It was in the valley of Sorek that he met Delilah, a woman whose beauty and cunning would prove his undoing. The Philistine rulers approached her, offering a great sum of silver to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. Greedy for wealth, she agreed. Delilah pleaded with Samson to tell her the source of his power. 3 times he deceived her, binding himself with new ropes, fresh bowstrings, or weaving his hair into a loom. Each time she called the Philistines upon him, yet each time he broke free. However, her persistence wore him down, and eventually he could resist no longer. "My strength lies in my hair," he confessed. "If it is cut, I will be like any other man." That night, as he lay in her lap, she called for a servant to shave his locks. When the Philistines came, he rose to fight, but the Lord had departed from him. Powerless, he was captured, his eyes gouged out, and he was led in chains to Gaza. They made him grind grain in prison, a once mighty warrior reduced to a blind slave. But in his suffering, he turned to God. His hair began to grow, and with it, the ember of his strength returned. Samson, once the mighty warrior of Israel, found himself reduced to a shadow of his former self. Blinded and shackled, he was thrown into the darkness of a Philistine prison. The chains that bound him were not just of iron, but of humiliation, a bitter testament to the downfall of the strongest man to have ever lived. The mighty judge, who had once torn apart lions and slain armies, now spent his days grinding grain like a common beast of burden. Yet, in this darkness, something stirred within him. His hair, the outward sign of his vow to God, began to grow again. And with it, so too did the ember of his faith, rekindling into a quiet, desperate hope. The Philistines, drunk with their victory, celebrated Samson's downfall as proof of the supremacy of their god, Dagon. In their greatest temple in Gaza, they planned a grand feast in honor of their victory. Thousands gathered, rulers, noblemen, and commoners alike, all eager to revel in the humiliation of their once feared enemy. As the wine flowed and laughter filled the air, the Philistine leaders called for Samson to be brought before them, so that they might gloat over his misery. A young boy, tasked with guiding the blinded champion, led Samson into the temple. The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers as they watched the fallen hero stumble forward. He was placed between the 2 great pillars that supported the temple. Though his sight was gone, his other senses were heightened, and he could feel the massive stone columns beneath his fingertips. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself amid the deafening roar of the crowd. In that moment, Samson whispered a prayer, not a plea for vengeance alone, but for the restoration of his strength, the return of his purpose. He knew that his life was at its end, but if he could bring destruction upon those who had oppressed Israel, if he could fulfill the calling placed upon him before birth, his death would not be in vain. "Lord God, remember me," he murmured. "Strengthen me just once more, that with one final act I may avenge myself upon the Philistines for my eyes." The Spirit of the Lord stirred within him. Energy coursed through his weary limbs, flooding his veins with divine power. He planted his feet firmly, pressing his hands against the pillars. The laughter of the Philistines echoed around him, oblivious to the force now surging through the blinded man before them. With a mighty cry, Samson strained against the stone columns. At first, the structure groaned in protest, the laughter in the temple turning into gasps of confusion. Then, the earth trembled beneath them as cracks splintered up the pillars, the foundations shaking violently. The mighty hall, which had stood as a monument to Dagon's triumph, now betrayed its worshippers. The great temple collapsed in a deafening roar, the walls crumbling and the ceiling falling, crushing those within. The screams of the Philistines were drowned in a cloud of dust and debris. Thousands perished that day, including the rulers who had orchestrated Israel's oppression. And in the center of it all, buried beneath the rubble, lay Samson, the man who had been destined to deliver his people. Though he had fallen, his final act had been his greatest victory. More Philistines died in his death than in all the battles he had fought in life. He had become, at last, the instrument of divine judgment that he was born to be. News of Samson's sacrifice spread throughout Israel, and his family came to retrieve his body. They buried him in the land of his fathers, mourning not only the man he had been, but the man he could have been. His story became legend, a tale of strength and weakness, of divine purpose and human frailty. And so ended the life of Samson, the strongest of men, a warrior bound by his passions, yet redeemed in his final hour by his faith. His life was a paradox, but his legacy endured, a testament to the power of God, working even through the most flawed of his servants. Samson's story did not end in the ruins of the Philistine temple. Though his body lay lifeless beneath the rubble, his legacy endured long after his death. His people, the Israelites, did not forget the sacrifice he had made. His brothers and his father's household came and took his body, burying him in the land of his ancestors, in the tomb of Manoah. The news of his final act spread across Israel, inspiring awe and sorrow in equal measure. For 20 years, Samson had judged Israel, leading them in times of conflict, fighting their oppressors with brute strength and unshakable confidence. Yet, his life was one of paradoxes. He was chosen by God before his birth, a vessel of divine power. Yet his weakness for the desires of his heart often led him astray. His great feats of strength were legendary, yet his greatest battle was always against himself. He was feared by his enemies, yet he found himself bound and broken by their hands. His name became both a warning and a source of inspiration, a lesson in both divine destiny and human frailty. The Philistines, who had long terrorized Israel, were thrown into disarray after Samson's final strike. Though his death did not end their dominance entirely, it was a turning point. The rulers who had schemed against him lay buried under the weight of their own temple, and their people trembled at the thought of Samson's God, the God of Israel, who had empowered a single man to bring down an entire nation's pride. Yet, Samson's legacy was not merely one of destruction. His life, though marked by personal struggles and moral failings, stood as a testament to the power of faith, even in one's final moments. He had strayed from his path many times, but in the end he turned back to God, and God answered him. His last prayer was not for his own glory, but for justice, for redemption, and for the fulfillment of his purpose. The lessons of Samson's life echoed throughout the generations. His story was told and retold, passed down from fathers to sons, from elders to youth. It was a story of power and humility, of triumph and tragedy. For many, Samson was a cautionary tale, proof that even the strongest could fall if they lost sight of their calling. To others, he was a hero, a man who, despite his flaws, achieved his greatest victory in the end. Many years later, Samson's story found a place in the sacred scriptures, where he was remembered among the judges of Israel. His name stood beside the great leaders of the past, a symbol of both human weakness and divine strength. Even the New Testament, written centuries later, would include him among the faithful in the book of Hebrews, recognizing him as a man who, despite his failures, acted in faith. And so Samson's legacy endured. His life was one of struggle, but his final act stood as a reminder that redemption is always within reach. He had been chosen, and though his path was troubled, he fulfilled his purpose in the end. For those who came after him, his story served as a reminder that true strength does not lie in muscle or might alone, but in faith, in resilience, and in the willingness to trust in something greater than oneself. Samson, the judge of Israel, had been a man of contradictions, but in his last breath he became a man of faith.